This story takes place in Osaka, Japan. A 64-year-old Japanese woman named Pamela Okada was arrested for putting a knife through her 76-year-old husband, Masaru Okada. Now, the reason why she did it is because her husband had asked her if dinner was ready. The story might seem crazy, but the comments are even more wild. So let's look at the facts. It was about 10:15 p.m. and the husband was lying in bed when the woman yelled to him, "Die!" as she put the kitchen knife through the right side of his abdomen. She decided to call the police and report the injury after it happened, telling them, "I just pierced my husband with a kitchen knife." First responders arrived soon after and rushed the man to the hospital. Sadly, he succumbed to his injuries while undergoing medical treatment. Mr. Okada was a working man at the age of 76 years old. When authorities asked Mrs. Okada why she put the kitchen knife through him, she said, "I got angry when he asked me if dinner was ready, so I told him to die and stabbed him." She mentions that he first asked her dismissively about dinner and then began to complain about his job while she was cooking. In response, when the man was lying in bed, she took out the knife and ended the life of her husband. She told police she and her husband had been quarreling for several days. Now, bear in mind, the victim is not alive to tell his side of the story, so there could be very substantial missing pieces in this narrative. This is important because Mrs. Okada will have her own incentives and potentially self-serving biases that portray her in a better light, despite having ended someone's life. Mrs. Okada was arrested on the spot and initially given the attempted M charge. However, police have since said this is under review following her husband's death, and the charge will likely be upgraded to the full M charge. They've said that the issue at hand is one of intent. According to Osaka.com, which covers news in Osaka, Japan, the assailant admits to piercing the victim with the knife, but despite this, it is not clear if she actually intended to kill him. However, it is worth noting that she literally said "die" to her husband as the incident occurred. And the man is 76 years old, so it's no surprise that he didn't survive, although to be fair, she was the one who called the police about 5 minutes afterwards. In other jurisdictions, one might try to plead a case of temporary insanity. However, in Japan, such rulings are extremely rare. The requirement for a perpetrator to be declared mentally unfit to stand trial are generally higher in Japan. The attacker would need to demonstrate a consistent pattern of mentally unstable behavior in the run-up to committing the crime rather than an isolated incident. At this time, no such patterns appear to be evident in Mrs. Pamela Okada's case. Alright, let's get into the comments because they are just as insane as the story itself. And hit that subscribe button if you want to help support the channel. This person says, "And now husbands everywhere will know never to ask, 'Isn't dinner done yet?' or to complain about our work." I can hear it now. It's the 1000th time. Hasn't spoken to her all week, first thing out of his mouth when he gets home. It sounds like these people know everything about Mr. and Mrs. Okada and their relationship as if they've been involved in it for many years. Another says, "Just couldn't put up with him any longer. Retirement and being together all day, every day must be just too much to bear for certain people." This one also portrays the assailant as the victim and tries to give her sympathy despite not actually knowing anything about her or her husband. Mrs. Okada, the wife, could very well have been the abusive one in the relationship, which would match the final results of her committing such an awful crime, so it doesn't make sense to just assume that she is the victim here. These kinds of comments did not just end there. He had it coming, he had it coming, he only had himself to blame. She reached the boiling point. Fair enough. Harsh but fair. We know nothing about the victim other than how his life ended. He might have been a wonderful and loving human being, and easily could have been the victim of domestic violence throughout this entire relationship with Mrs. Okada. These kinds of comments create a false narrative with many assumptions that try to victim blame. They imply that the knifing was justified and remove blame from the attacker, even though we don't know the victim's side of the story. The fact that this woman committed this fatal act likely says a lot more about her than the victim. Some might say these are just jokes, but this is the reason why male victims of domestic violence, or SA, are often not taken seriously. Most people don't even realize that women are just as likely to perpetrate domestic violence, and the evidence is often ignored.
If I were to draw a big pie chart of all partner violence, half of that pie chart straight away is bilateral violence.
That's right.
Of the remaining half, 70% of that is perpetrated by women.
That's right.
And then after that, 30% of that second half, so 15% overall, is men.
Yes, and the 15% committed by males, 2/3 of that is just pushing and shoving. So it's not wife battering. So you get down to the things like hitting her or kicking her that could be wife battering, 5%.
So the most common form of partner violence, bilateral, followed by female perpetrated, followed then third place, bronze medal for male violence. And yet that's all we seem to see and hear about.
That's right.
This is the result of when society creates these kinds of narratives that remove all accountability from female abusers, even when they commit incredibly serious crimes resulting in death. The attitude of, well, he must have done something wrong to deserve it, only perpetuates a victim blaming, and these quote-unquote jokes have real-life implications on actual victims of domestic violence. Thankfully, there are people who restore my faith in humanity. Comment section is wild, a lot of unhinged people dissatisfied with their lives on this sub. Jesus, the replies here are crazy. The comment section here is wild. They can't believe the title, but if the gender was reversed, no one would have a problem believing it. They called out the fact that some of these comments were problematic. And then a reply to that saying, people have no respect for human life. This is true. You know nothing about the man except that he is a victim of domestic violence who had his life ended by his wife, and you're going to disrespect the victim of all people. How would you feel if one of your loved ones was victimized to the point of their death, and then for them to be disrespected based on people's unhinged imaginations? It's disrespectful to all of this man's loved ones, the people who actually know anything about him, and of course to the victim himself. Additionally, it's disrespectful to victims of domestic violence as a whole. It's no wonder this is such an underreported crime, especially for boys and men who are often refused any help or support from organizations based on gender. Another person calls out misandrists out in droves these days. Sexists, much like racists, get furious when they're called out for it. And this comment shown earlier, harsh but fair, got some very enlightening replies. How does this have so many upvotes? They had a full discourse on this. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say because it accords with popular sentiment. You know, the popular sentiment was once that owning slaves was okay, but society realized that was a garbage popular sentiment and got past that point, fortunately. I guess we found another garbage popular sentiment. Comparing slavery to an abused woman killing her abuser after the final straw seems disingenuous. The comparison is that a lot of times the popular opinion is wrong. Not that slavery is just as bad as killing a quote-unquote abuser. Plus you're saying she's an abused woman, but all we know is that he asked if dinner was ready and complained about his work. If you think stabbing someone just because of that is fair, even if he has said that several times before, you have severe mental problems. If you aren't happy with someone, just divorce them. This person raised some really good points. Evidently, they never compared this case to slavery. All they said was that these are examples of where the popular sentiment was trash. And again, no part of this story says that this woman was abused. We can't just make this assumption based on absolutely nothing. We actually don't even know if he asked if dinner was ready or if he complained about his work. The victim is not alive to tell us the truth, unfortunately. I really commend this person for going on further to say, I don't underestimate the internet's capacity for having the most pathetic takes. I've seen people dead serious say worse shit than this. So what do you think about what this woman did to her husband, and what are your thoughts on the comments? Were they unhinged? Were they acceptable? Let us know. And if you like the video, please do subscribe, comment, and like to show your support. And check out our latest video up on the screen.